Welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I want to thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. And I want to dive right in to a hot topic conversation and continue with healthcare, trauma, and now add another piece of women's healthcare. Women's healthcare is very, very important, and it goes hand in hand with the trauma of being uninsured, the trauma of being food insecure. And now think of yourself as being a woman who is now pregnant and having to give her growing baby nutritious food, provide her growing baby with prenatal health care to make sure that the pregnancy goes as best as it can. Just think of all of those things, all of those pressures, all of those stresses, all of the trauma that can come from that in itself, whether it's carrying a baby, which can be very, very, very difficult for a woman, a grown woman to carry a baby. Maybe you are a teenage parent or a child that is pregnant. They're sometimes known as children carrying children. That can be very, very traumatic on not just the individual, but as the family unit as a whole. Maybe think of being a victim of rape or incest. That can be very traumatic, unbelievably traumatic. A woman who's had a miscarriage, or a woman who is experiencing infertility. Those can all be very powerful situations that women find themselves in, and that can affect them mentally and lead to more traumatic experiences. And the situations compound each other. Healthcare and the care for our uninsured population is compounded by food insecurity, which is further compounded by any of these other situations. It's like a very complex puzzle with complex pieces. And sometimes you just don't know where to put the pieces and how they're going to fit together. And sometimes they fit together in a terrible mess and create such havoc on a family unit or on situations. And sometimes it's nobody's fault. A lot of these situations, no one intended for them. No one planned it. It just happened. And I personally have never been pregnant, but when you get to be my age, people have shared their stories. And I'm so thankful that people have shared their stories and their vulnerability, their stories of joy, of wonderment, but also their joy of pain and suffering and struggle. Is some women, you know, have the most amazing experiences as a pregnant woman. They experience their pregnancies in joyful, profound ways. And that's wonderful. That's how it should be. You should be surrounded by love. You should be surrounded by all of the capabilities and the possibilities that a beautiful future can hold. But not everyone experiences that. I've heard stories of people that have struggled, and they've trusted me to listen to their stories, and I appreciate it so much. Um, I've heard stories about people who have experienced 9 months of pure bliss, and they've loved carrying a child and feeling a child grow inside of them, and they've loved experiencing everything that comes with that, and they've had great childbirth, experiences. They never felt pain, and they had a wonderful experience. But I've also heard of people that have struggled, um, people that struggle to have prenatal health care because they're uninsured, because it's too expensive, because they can't afford transportation to get there. And I know people say, well, there are public bus service available, but have you been on the public bus service? Well, I have, and I have heard stories of people that have been on the public bus service. And what would normally take someone 30 minutes, a trip to go 15, 30 minutes in a car, can easily take a couple of hours on a bus system that has to stop and wait and stop and wait and stop and wait all along the way. And most individuals in this high, fast-paced world don't have hours to spend going somewhere, and they can't afford an Uber or a taxi. And any family or friends may be in the exact same situation they're in or far worse. Or, people may not own a car. There's so many reasons. And once you have the transportation, maybe you aren't insured. And a lot of those things that I've just talked about, they deter people from going to get prenatal care. Oh, it's too expensive. Oh, I can't get there. It's not convenient. You know, I'm a single mother, or I I can't, I don't have the time. I have to work. I don't have the time to go and take care of myself. I don't have the time to do these necessary things because I'm always working, because I have to support my family, because I have to support the children that I have. And then you get to the people, well, why have more children when you can't even provide for the ones that you have? What a horrible, horrible thing to say to people. What a horrible thing to say. And those kind of things, the transportation comments that can be made, those comments are comments from a place of privilege that knows nothing about the other side of things, knows nothing about not having transportation or not having the abilities or the capabilities to be able to do these things. But we all need to try and understand each other and have patience as we learn and as we try to understand. I've heard stories of people that this was an unexpected pregnancy. We all have things like that. Sure, we know what leads to being pregnant. Sure, we're all adults. We know how things happen, but But sometimes things happen unexpectedly. That's just life. And, you know, that can be another complication that adds to the complexity of the situation. What about, I've heard stories of people, of small children that have been raped or victims of incest. What about adult women that have been victims of rape or incest? That brings a whole different perspective and a whole different complexity to the issue. It's hard for women, grown women, to have children. It's hard on their bodies. What about children that didn't do anything, that are victims? What about grown women that are victims? And now their world has come crashing down. And now not only do they have their world to try and take care of, but now there's a baby that they need to think about and try and take care of. These are all circumstances that are real and that happen. And we need to think about these kinds of things. It's not so black and white. Women's women's reproductive rights and women's situations that they find themselves in are not so black and white, this and that, one way or another. There's so many grays. What about the women that find themselves facing infertility? For one reason or another. Maybe it's something to do with them. Maybe it's something to do with their partner, um, or maybe they're in a same-sex relationship, but they want children. All of these things just compound women's health and the idea of having children, not having children, or being faced with circumstances that are very impactful and very traumatic. And then there's infertility, but there's also miscarriages. What if, you know, everything is wonderful, you're pregnant, and then something happens and you miscarry the baby that you were so excited to carry. And that can happen in the first, second, third trimester. I spoke, a very dear woman told me of her struggles. She was pregnant 3 times, carried the baby to the third trimester 3 times, set up 3 separate nurseries, had 3 separate baby showers, was so excited every time in the third trimester she had a miscarriage. Because it was in the third trimester, she had to carry that baby and deliver that baby, even though it was already dead. That has to be so traumatic to a person. I cannot even begin to imagine. And she went on to tell me that she was pregnant a 4th time, but she was so numb to the idea that she wasn't excited. Her and her husband did not have a baby shower. They didn't even tell anyone she was pregnant. Um, they didn't. They didn't start to fix up a nursery for the baby. They just didn't do anything. But she finally was able to give birth to a child. And it's a strong, healthy child. But not everybody experiences that. And it comes to some of that comes from, just the situations, um, the health of the family, and the situation. But some of that comes from, uh, you know, not being able to have prenatal health care. Sometimes if you don't have the prenatal health care, you can't have a healthy child. Sometimes you can't even carry a child full term if you don't have prenatal health care. And then there comes prenatal health care is expensive. I can't afford it. These things are very personal and very detrimental to women, I think. And then you hear horror stories, as if we haven't already touched on horror stories, but you hear horror stories of husbands and wives that have had to make a choice during the birth of their children, um, make that choice of the mother or the baby. Which is that going to be, and how heartbreaking that must be to be in that situation, to have to choose. And maybe as a family unit, you've had to choose. Maybe you have been able to have the prenatal care that you need, and it's been discovered that, well, this baby is going to struggle when it's born. It's going to maybe live for a week, 2 weeks, 1 month, but it's going to struggle that entire time. It's going to be blind. It's going to be deaf. This baby may have to be hooked up to machines for its entire life. It comes to a point where you just don't know. Or if your wife does carry this child full term, she may lose her life before that, or during childbirth, or there's so many things that come into play when you talk about women and healthcare and reproductive rights and reproductive health care. So I just encourage you. I've just touched briefly on some topics, on some areas of conversation, but I just want us to think about things, think about different perspectives, and I want to bring awareness and to start conversations that we can talk to each other, that we can learn from each other, that we can share with each other, and that we can respect each other's decisions, and not try to make decisions or to force people into things that they're just not ready for. And let's try and understand each other and try and love each other and just try and talk to each other. I thank you for joining me for this time. And I just want to reiterate that you're not alone. We're on a journey together, and you do not have to suffer alone. Thank you.